Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists, a warm welcome to today's webinar, India and North Africa, Avenues for Strategic Dialogue and Cooperation, organized by the Policy Center for the New South and the Observer Research Foundation, where we embark on an exploration of the evolving dynamics between North African countries and India. We are in a world characterized by unprecedented interconnectedness and interdependence. And in this world, the significance of diplomatic, security, and economic relations cannot be overstated. They are the lifeblood of international cooperation, shaping the fortunes of individual nations, of bilateral cooperation, but also the trajectory of multilateralism on key issues such as the reform of the United Nations, international financial institutions, which are all prominent themes on the agendas of leaders in both North Africa and India. In the economic realm, North African countries and India have taken crucial steps in their transformation. For North African countries, the objective is clear: become emerging economic powers. This is why they are showing great ambition in their pursuit of decarbonization, attracting foreign direct investment in technology-centered industries, and also the development of sustainable supply chains. And this is also strategically aligned with India's drive to position itself as a manufacturing powerhouse and a hub for advanced technological goods. So as we delve into these junctures, it is our privilege to introduce four distinguished speakers, each possessing unique insights and expertise in the fields shaping the collaboration between North Africa and India. We have Madam Mounia Boucetta, Senior Fellow at the Policy Center for the New South, with over 20 years of experience in public administration, holding numerous managerial and leadership roles, and working particularly on the development of industrial and commercial policies. She was most recently Secretary of State to the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Morocco from 2017 to 2019. We have with us Dr. Meena Singh Roy, Head of Eurasia and West Asia Center at the Tillotoma Foundation, and former head Eurasia and West Asia Center at the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis. And Dr. Singh Roy, area of specialization are Central Asia and West Asia. We have His Excellency Ambassador Navdeep Suri, a distinguished fellow with the Observer Research Foundation. He has had a 36-year-long career in the Indian Foreign Service. He served in India's diplomatic missions in Cairo, Damascus, Washington, Dar es Salaam, and London. He was also India's Consul General in Johannesburg, High Commissioner to Australia, and Ambassador to Egypt and UAE. And we have finally His Excellency Ambassador Mohammed Loulichki, Senior Fellow at the Policy Center for the New South, with an extensive 40 years experience in diplomacy and legal affairs, where he assumed pivotal leadership roles in the Moroccan Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He was also Ambassador of Morocco in various nations, as well as Ambassador of Morocco to the United Nations in Geneva, New York, and where he served as President of the Security Council in December 2012. Thank you very much for being with us today. So we can maybe set up the question with what actually attracts most the cooperation between India and North African countries, which is the economic realm. And perhaps, Madam Boucetta, you can give us maybe an idea on what is the current state of economic cooperation between India and North African countries, and what sectors appears promising to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think in the economic field, because we start with the economic field, partnership between the North African region and India are multiple and very diversified for several reasons. The first one, we have North Africa is a market of more than 200 population, with the substantial socio-economical economic development needs, particularly in healthcare, education, industry, infrastructure, offering substantial partnership opportunities with India. And the second point, some countries in the region possess abundant natural resources and have well-developed industrial and airport infrastructure, but others require significant infrastructure investment. So Indian companies can participate in projects related to roads, ports, railways, and urban development. And the third point, we know that North Africa is in strategic geostrategic position and location. It is in the sound of the Mediterranean region. Its proximity to Europe, and it's in connection with the other countries in Africa. So that could offer opportunities to access to European and African markets for investors, and also that will give more opportunities to have more exchange and attract for investment. However, there are limitations of the intensification of trade and investments for different reasons between, or several considerations between North Africa and India, and I think there are still a big potential that is not now explored. The first one, we have countries in the region exhibit significant differences, even that we have many similarities, but we have significant differences in terms of the business environment, economic competitiveness, political stability, and macroeconomic conditions. And that's certainly have an impact on developing trade and investment. The second point, we have the regional economic contribution is very limited. So relation between India and countries in North Africa is to consider as a bilateral relation and not at regional level. And that, I think, limits the possibility of developing more integrated relations in economic sector. And the third point is related to the context of regulation and policies, and there is a lack of standardization of policies and regulation that certainly have an impact on how we can develop the framework in our regional level. So to fully harness the economic potential of the North African region, it may be necessary to strengthen regional cooperation, harmonize economic policies and regulations, and overcome barriers to economic integration to create a more conducive environment for trade and investment. And if you have to consider Morocco situation, and it's important for me, yes, to highlight some aspect related to political context, even that the Ambassador Loulichki, certainly they will highlight this point. But we think that it's very important to consider that relations and political relations are very important to create the condition for a very economic and competitive relation at economic level. So the partnership between Morocco and India enjoys a very particular political context. We know that we have an ancestral relationship that has been strengthened since the meeting of King Mohammed VI with Prime Minister Modi in 2015. That was a very big momentum, and that creates a real condition to reinforce ties between the two countries and to deepen in several areas, including economics, politics, culture, and defense. And recently, I think ministers of foreign affairs from both countries reaffirmed their interest to strengthen their relationships and exploring ways to further enhance cooperation at an even more ambitious level. Now, all these conditions for me is very important to make the basis and how can I say, the global framework necessary to improve economic cooperation. And in 2022, I think we have noted that the bilateral trade between India and Morocco was about 3.2 billion of dollars. That is a very important amount, and I think that's the first time that we have reached this point. And we can mainly highlight 5 areas of common interest where we can collaborate and cooperate. And we can say that one of them is agriculture and fertilizer industry. Morocco is one of the largest producers of phosphates and fertilizer based on phosphate, and which is key ingredient in agriculture. And we know that India is one of the world's largest agriculture producers. So that has significant demand for fertilizer. And the cooperation between India and Morocco has reached high level because we have a joint project and we have also great ambitions from both sides. And I think that's one area we will have the possibility to enhance cooperation and needs. And in automotive sector is another sector, I think, where Morocco and India can collaborate. We know that India has the ambition to be one of the major actors in electric cars and have developed many technology platforms. And in the other side, Morocco is one of the largest and very competitive automotive base in Africa. So we have already many investors that have chosen Moroccan to build their platform to accede to European markets. And I think it's still the trend should be continue for the next years to seize other opportunities and develop it. Education, we know that education remains one of the strategic field of cooperation. We have more than 700 Moroccans that benefit from it, and it should continue because we know that it's very important for us to have building capacity of Moroccan to support the expansion of many other sectors. Renewable energy and hydrogen also is a very good opportunity for us, and I'm sure that we'll have the different possibility to cooperate and to seize many opportunities between us to develop and to have innovative and very smart approach for responsible solution. And by the end, we can say that healthcare and pharmaceutical sectors are also big opportunities of cooperation between two countries. So I think I will just mention this, and then maybe I can continue after if you have a discussion after. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Boucetta. I mean, for sure, the potential is big in the economic field, and also maybe going to the diplomatic potential of the relations between North African countries and India. Your Excellency Ambassador Suri, I mean, what is India's perception of North Africa's role in its multifaceted engagement in the Arab world, but also the African continent?
Well, thank you very much for taking the initiative to bring us all together to discuss this very important subject. Your webinar comes at a time when we've just finished the BRICS summit. The Prime Minister leaves tomorrow for the ASEAN summit and returns to Delhi to host the G20 summit. The reason I'm saying this is when we talk of India's relations with North Africa, and I take the liberty of speaking candidly amongst friends, this is, as Shakespeare would say, the best of times and the worst of times. It's the best of times because India is actively engaging with the world. I think the level of energy that we've seen being put into foreign policy over the last 5 or 6 years is unprecedented for somebody like me who's served in the diplomatic service for 3.5 decades. The sheer number of countries that have been visited, the number of new embassies that have been opened in Africa and Latin America and all, is an indication of our intent to engage much more actively on the global stage. But there's the flip side of it, which is that we today, and I don't want to sound immodest, so please don't get me wrong on this, but we today find ourselves unusually in a sweet spot where geopolitics and geoeconomics are converging into this Goldilocks kind of situation, where India finds itself being wooed by different countries, by different blocs. Partly, it's the economics, the fact not only that we are the fastest growing major economy, we become the 5th largest economy in the world, we should become the 3rd largest economy in the next 6 or 7 years, but also because of what's happened in the last 3 years or so. I think the COVID-19 pandemic brought home the realization that the globalization that we had seen had centralized supply chains in China. And suddenly people were waking up and saying, we need to diversify supply chains, we need to diversify manufacturing. And when you look at large countries that could do that, India became very much prominent in that restructuring of the global supply chain. So next week, for example, iPhone 15 that you might get may be made in India, because Apple is rapidly moving its iPhone production to South India. That's just an example. There's also the geopolitical side where, India was rising steadily, but what's given us a big and unexpected boost, and again, I speak candidly amongst friends, is the manner in which China has behaved over the last few years. And so you see, on one hand, the tensions that we in India have faced with China on our border. But you also see, for example, in this new map that they released a couple of days back, where countries like Philippines and Indonesia and even Nepal, which were not hostile to China by any stretch of the imagination, have been forced to respond fairly strongly against this kind of cartographic aggression, as it's being called. When you add US-China competition into the mix, you are then seeing a whole new equation where countries are talking about trusted partners, and you're talking about friendshoring in terms of where investments will come. So India finds itself in this really interesting spot since the last couple of years in particular. And so what it means is that from a North African perspective, and I speak as a friend, in a sense, you have to work extra hard to get that attention span. And in any case, you know, with Morocco, for example, I feel that after His Majesty King Hassan's very successful visit and his meetings on the sidelines of the India-Africa Forum Summit in 2015, it's really time for Prime Minister Modi to go back to visit Morocco now. And that visit is overdue in some sense. And I know that now, as soon as this round of summiteering is over, we will probably be getting into election season in India. And so you'll have to wait till at least the second half of next year before that high-level attention gets focused. And that's something that you can keep in mind. But it does, point to the imperative to present or project North Africa and its strengths much more actively and aggressively than perhaps has been done, to send home to countries like India the message that Asia matters to you, not just Europe, and that if we are looking at Asia and Africa as the future, then we really need to engage much more actively with each other. What's the reality today? And, you know, I love the title of your paper, Hamza, where you said North Africa and India, the invisible partnership. You know, we want this partnership to be visible. We don't want this to remain invisible. We want to it to be acknowledged that just as we were very close with Algeria, with Libya, with Morocco in the 60s and 70s and 80s, within the ambit of the non-aligned movement, etc., today there are new possibilities for us in terms of how we can connect. And for instance, just a thought that I'm putting forward is minilaterals are a flavor right now, whether you see the Quad or you see the I2U2 of India, Israel, US, UAE, you see an India, France, UAE trilateral, you see India, France, Australia trilateral. Maybe when you have a situation where North Africa itself is not as cohesive as it used to be, we can look at minilaterals which bring together like-minded countries that can work much more effectively. Because the reality today, as I see it, is we have a strong platform with Morocco, but really $3 billion is a very small number in terms of our bilateral trade. It should be much higher. Our level of ambition should be much greater than that. I see a handful of Indian companies with relatively small investments, but frankly, if you take phosphates out of the equation, then what you have left, and maybe automotives to a certain extent, you don't have a lot. Where's Indian IT, for example? It's a $250 billion industry, right? How do we create more opportunities for engagement in that space? I see that Morocco has emerged as a major potential source of lithium. You have EV ambitions. We are planning to be one of the largest EV markets. How do we move early, get the concerned players connected so that we take advantage of an opportunity that did not exist earlier. How do we bring Morocco, for example, into the focus like has happened with Egypt? I mean, having served as India's ambassador to Egypt, I can tell you that we used to lament that there was an absence of high-level visits. There's no problem in the relationship, right? But there wasn't that much substance either. So you could keep talking about friendly things. And on the ground, the action was relatively limited. And then last year, we sent both our foreign minister and our defense minister to Egypt. They prepared the ground on a range of different things. We ended up inviting President Sisi as the chief guest on our Republic Day parade. And then Prime Minister stopped over in Egypt on his way back from Europe. Now, this is when we invited for Republic Day, this was our way of saying that this is a relationship that matters. And I'm consciously focusing on Egypt and Morocco, not just because of the size of the economies and the fact that we have a particular relationship, but there's also a reality that Libya, with which we had a very, very active relationship until it fell into its bout of political instability. We had 32,000 Indians in Libya. And I know that because I was actively involved in evacuating them out of the country when things were falling apart. It'll take a while before you can do anything substantial in Libya, right? Despite the intent being good. We see Tunisia and Algeria, again, kind of battling, how open they want to be, where are they positioned, the internal situations in these countries. So I think, pragmatically speaking, you have Morocco at one end and Egypt at the other as the two real pivots for an India-North Africa connect. And maybe that's a good starting point for the three countries to start looking at it as a continuum. And later, as things change on the ground in Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, maybe we will find more opportunities for working together in the kind of regional context of North Africa as you present. I guess I'm being the hard-nosed diplomat and saying, let's focus on what is doable rather than get caught in the semantics of a big idea which may not see the reality for several years to come. Let me stop there.
Thank you very much, your ambassador. I mean, absolutely, there is great potential, and also there is the reality, which is North Africa is also a region that has significant fragmentation. And maybe we can move right now to His Excellency Ambassador Loulichki, where he can give us maybe some ideas on how to converge, but also maybe he's also understanding a perception of the reality of the diplomatic relations between North African countries and India.
Thank you. And it's really a pleasure to connect with our friends through this wonderful technology. Well, I will begin my presentation, well, I would say my talk, not a real presentation, with the two caveats. The first one is about this association of North Africa with in the MENA region. I think the Middle East has its philosophy, its way of doing things, and North Africans have a different way of acting and interacting. The second one is when I know that India is a continent and it has a preference to deal with other continents. It's a matter of size and weight and power. But in North Africa, unfortunately, as mentioned by my colleagues, Hamza Mjahed, the fragmentation of these regions bring us to the reality that if we really want to talk about what we can do together with India, then we have to talk about both Morocco and Morocco in Africa. So this is how, if you don't mind, this is how I'm going to structure my talk. And I will structure it around 1, 2, 3, 4 points. The first one is the common values that we share with India. The second one is all the common objectives. And the third is the common challenges. And from these values, these objectives and the challenges, what can we do together? What India and Morocco and what India with Africa can do together. First, as I said, we have common values. I think Morocco and India value the principle of dialogue, of negotiations, of non-violence, of diversified social fabric in our respective societies. We attach greater importance to the human security and human development. The human being is the center of our public policies, and this has always been the line of action by His Majesty for the last 20 years. And non-alignment. We talk about Gandhi, we talk about Nehru, but we also talk about Mohammed V, who was also one of the founders of this movement. Values also have to do with the very committed India towards the decolonization. So both India and Morocco strive to help the remaining non-independent Africans to gain their independence. Now, as to the objectives that we share, I would mention the preservation of territorial integrity and the unity of the nation. This is of a paramount importance to both countries. Working for peace and security. And I think that the international community takes the contribution of the blue helmets from India in almost all the peacekeeping operations that are in Africa. And this has a meaning, and this has an impact. Both India and Morocco want to influence positively the world order. We have a lot of uncertainties, we have a lot of vulnerabilities, and Morocco and India have the same vision of trying to influence positively the world order. But when I talk about the world order, I primarily about multilateralism, preserving multilateralism, making multilateralism coming back to its fundamentals of solidarity, of legitimacy, and of representativity. Another objective is pursuing national interest, not with the hard power, but with the soft power. I would say with smart power even. But in talking about smart power, there is absolutely no comparison between India and Morocco. When you talk about Bollywood, there is no corresponding industry in this country about Bollywood. And you have also this industry of yoga that is invading the whole world. That is something that is extremely valuable. So from these values and objectives, I will try to list some of the common challenges that we have to try to overcome. The first one is a difficult neighborhood. Both you and us, we cannot change geography, unfortunately. We have to do with a very difficult and very versatile neighborhood. The second one is the challenge is socioeconomic development, even if it is differentiated between India and Morocco. There is absolutely, again, no comparison, not in terms of effort, resources that are put in, but also in terms of the level of success. Reforming the world order, reforming the Security Council, allowing countries like India to have a seat. And I think from the start, Morocco has always been extremely supportive. And I'm not disclosing a secret, but I really had the chance to sit in the Security Council with Navdeep Singh Roy, who is a real statesman and a very good friend, and he gave a very good image of India during his tenure. Making the UN more inclusive, more legitimate, more credible also is something that also all of us are trying to do. So from these challenges, what can we do together? What can your country and us can we do together? First, as I said, Security Council and multilateralism, but let me also say that Africa is extremely important for both. It is extremely important because it is in the DNA of Morocco, but it is also important for India because India cannot miss this rush to Africa by all the superpowers. And you have the advantage of being, for the public opinion, for civil society in Africa, the most sympathetic. There is a lot of sentimentalism. Nehru lived Gandhi lived 20 years in South Africa, and this has an impact. Nehru, I think, influenced immensely. I think he is the one that made Nelson Mandela in a certain way, and it has really a huge impact. India is becoming a major actor in Africa, and this is something I think that we have to take stock of, but not enough, as you said, not enough. I think that we have to both to improve, and I think both Morocco and Africa can, with the limits, of course, of the resources of each and every one, to try to do things together in Africa. We have the temptation always to say that we are the gateway to Africa. I know that India doesn't need Morocco to go to Africa, but sometimes, for example, as far as West Africa is concerned, we have a deep knowledge of this part of Africa, and we can be of certain. We can be useful to India. We're always talking about trilateral cooperation compared to triangular cooperation, compared to South in the framework of South-South cooperation. And when we talk about triangular, it's always Western countries or international organizations plus Morocco plus receiving states. I think we have also to improve, saying that India, Morocco can benefit also Africa. I know that you are very discreet. Mr. Hamza talked about the invisible India in Africa. If he had consulted me, I would have said the discreet role of India, because the philosophy of India is not of being invisible. It's being discreet and humble. Humility is one of the main features of Indian. That's what makes them extremely strong than us and more efficient. So I think just to really wrap up, I think that Africa is missing something, not to solicit India, for example, when it comes to technologies, when it comes to artificial intelligence. India is a hub now, and I think that Africa can really benefit immensely from intensifying cooperation in this field, beside, of course, agriculture for food security, etc., etc. So to sum up, as I said, this webinar, I would like it to be an invitation to the two countries, one, to develop bilateral relations so that they can really live up to the ambitions of the two countries and also to the potential of the two countries. Second one is to try to act jointly when it's possible in Africa. And the third one is to strive together to restore multilateralism. I'll stop at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Loulichki. Absolutely. There are a lot of issues of convergence, and one is also security and defense. In my opinion, this is perhaps the most discrete part of the cooperation between India and North African countries. Not to say invisible, because discrete is obviously a much better framing of this partnership. So, Dr. Singh Roy, can you just maybe give us a bit on how security and defense can actually expand the horizons of these relations? And also, what are the emerging dynamics that actually interest India in terms of what is happening in North Africa, but also the regions that connect North Africa with India in its vital space?
Thank you so much. Let me at the outset thank ORF and PCNC for holding this dialogue at such a important time. Basically, I think timings is very, very important. And what brings me now to talk about in next 10 to 12 minutes that have been given to me, I've been asked to cover kind of economic and defense and security aspects, the questions that I got. But I think much has been said by the previous speakers as far as the opportunities, the challenges, the limitations, and what can be done in the economic arena. Before I start, looking at security and defense cooperation, let me, come to the point that, Africa is actually become very, very important for India. And a very recent statement of Prime Minister Modi, makes it a point that, it is practically, being implemented as far as India's policy towards the African continent. It's a huge continent, we cannot talk about Africa-India relations, it has to be Southern Africa, East Africa, North Africa. But I think the initiative of India about inclusion of Africa in G20 is something which really speaks about the significance which India gives to Africa. And in Prime Minister Modi's word, when he said that Africa is the top priority for India and that India works for the inclusion of those whose voices are not being heard. Many positive impacts are coming out of India's G20 presidency. Some of them are very close to my heart. Now, this is the statement given by Prime Minister Modi, which reflects the new dynamics of India's increased engagement at different levels with different continents. And Africa definitely comes out very, very significantly in various debates that we are having. So, much has been talked about the new, global order. But what, I would say, we are seeing the new trends in whether it is a globalization, whether it is a new regionalism that we see. And Ambassador Suri talked about the minilateral arrangement. So I think today, two events, particularly the pandemic and, of course, the Russia-Ukraine war, have created a new, challenges and it also offers the new opportunities for us, whether we are talking about the economic relations, whether we are talking about the security cooperation, whether we are talking about, taking interest-based, certain, areas. And particularly here comes the energy, the food security. These things have come up. But there has been a new, sort of trend when we look at India's foreign policy approach, and which is driven mainly by not only looking inwards, but also, trying to take the world along. If we see two major statements, is that the present government wants to work and build the strategic partnerships, the partnerships where the both countries would benefit. And there has been basically, major, scaling up of the strategic partnerships that you see since 2014. And let us look at the strength of India today. Ambassador Puri talked about the growing economy, the 5th largest. India will also become a developed nation by 2047. And then whether it is science or technology or, maritime cooperation, the defense cooperation, here when I'm looking at security and defense cooperation, particularly in the security arena, we are looking at countering extremism and terrorism. We are looking at the threat which the radicalization imposes, today to the whole world. And this is where, India and North Africa, I mean, yes, there are, I would not say that when we say West Asia and North Africa, the West Asia part of it, I mean, in your paper also you've talked about, has got major, focus, and there has been scaling up of a strategic defense, security, trade, every aspect of the relationship. If we see West Asia definitely gets more highlighted when we talk about the achievements. But the focus on North Africa is something Ambassador Puri talked about, a focus within North Africa on Egypt, on Morocco, on Tunisia, on Algeria, but mainly it is Egypt and Morocco that I see today, getting more significance in that sense. However, when we talk about the bilateral versus regional, I mean, I personally feel, we need to look at bilateral first, because that will set the tone. Since there are many limitations which have been pointed out by our previous speakers, I think, strengthening bilateral cooperation would take the initiative forward. And also, we are looking at the multilateral arrangements, and the multilateral arrangements will definitely help us. Because if we talk about food security today, whether we talk about countering radicalism and extremism, even in 2015, Prime Minister Modi talked about the achievements of Morocco in countering terrorism, extremism, and radicalization. And this is where, the strength of bilateral relation lies, which can be implemented in due course of time, bringing in other regional countries. So I think when we are looking at the security cooperation, the key areas that we need to look at is counter-radicalization initiatives. And having been in Rabat for couple of conferences, I do know various initiatives that Morocco has taken in de-radicalization. And I think that is one strength of a country, which can be taken forward bilaterally. And of course, it can be later, taken up in the regional context, in the international context. In the United Nations, of course, this is where there is convergence of interest when we talk about dealing with these security challenges. And we do see the new security threats coming up today. It is not only the traditional, but the non-traditional challenges are something where you cannot address the problems bilaterally. You need to have a unilateral, you need to have regional, you need to have an international cooperation. So the nature of the problem is global today. And, the solutions have to be global, but, you need to strengthen your bilateral cooperation at certain, building a common theme, building a consensus on a particular problem is something which will require a greater focus on dealing with these kind of issues. So, I mean, if we want to look at that, then I think Morocco and Egypt are two very, very important partners in North Africa when we are looking at security cooperation, radicalization, counterterrorism, even drug trafficking. There are many other issues which can be part of it. And I would probably suggest, there can be a common paper written jointly by the scholars and, experts on that side and in ORF, which will thrash out, the ideas as to what are the common factors. Ambassador talked about, the commonality of approach that India and Morocco have. But I think it is very important to come up with a policy paper on specific sectors. And I think that is what will take our dialogue and partnership forward. Let us look at the security and defense. Today, we are living in an era where, the new security challenges are coming up. We have, Ambassador Suri talked about aggressive China and China's presence. It's also, this developmental diplomacy. How much is the developmental part? We don't know. But you don't sign, 80 years, 90 years of a contract on a port, if you don't have a strategic goal and, some strategic initiatives that you want to take for your future. I think there are question marks when we look at certain developmental, offers which China is providing. China has its own strengths. China also has its own limitations. So one has to see how best, the countries of Africa and Asia can manage their cooperation in the security arena, in the maritime domain, also in the infrastructure projects that are coming up, so that you don't fall a trap into a kind of an arrangement which will not allow the development of a particularly of a smaller country. So I think that aspect is very, very important, and these are changing. We also see US-China rivalry. We see parallel geo-economic developments today. De-dollarization is being talked about, trade in local currencies being talked about. So these are the, trends which will have to be taken into account when we are looking at building either bilateral, regional cooperation. So I think the strategic part of the economic cooperation, the strategic part of any bilateral and regional cooperation has to take into account the new realities which are unfolding today. When, we look at defense cooperation, here I'm talking about the defense cooperation more in the arena of defense diplomacy, which includes cooperation in the area which is mutually beneficial to both the countries. And, for India, this was very, in a very elaborate way defined by none other than our previous, naval chief, who talks about the 4 pillars, the 4 C's under which the foreign cooperation initiatives are being undertaken when we look at India's defense diplomacy. And these are mainly the capacity building, the provision of military assets and military infrastructure development, capability enhancement, the military training, technical and hydrographic assistance, exclusive economic zone surveillance, etc. And the constructive engagement where we are looking at military level talks, military exercises, ship visits, and the collaborative efforts where the symposium constructs conclaves, etc., are being talked about. So when we are talking about the defense diplomacy and the capacity enhancement, we are looking at the regular annual strategic dialogue. Military training, military technical assistance, exclusive economic zone border surveillance, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. These are some of the areas, which have the requirement of every nation today. mapping, geospatial hydrographic assistance, land, air, maritime domain awareness. So some of the areas, which talk about the cooperation and the capability building is what, can be the future, sort of a vision for cooperation if we are looking at defense and security cooperation. We are looking at the constructive engagement. So these are some of the key areas where, we can discuss and talk about it, what is doable, what is not doable. But I think as a think tanker, our part is to offer the options and leave it to the practitioner to see what can be picked up from that and what are the possibilities. So I think when we are looking at providing options, these are some of the areas where one can look at. What are India's strengths? I think, India's strength lies in providing training programs, specialized exercise and coordinated patrols, cooperation and disaster management. I think sports, adventure sports and activities is another area, which is doable. Increasing, exchange of young officers in the institutions, in the military institution is something which is doable. Exchange of official, creating kind of, working groups, on defense cooperation, on security cooperation is something which needs to be implemented in terms of, regular engagement. There has to be high level. Yes, Ambassador Suri said, North Africa, if we compare it with the other countries, other regions, doesn't get the same attention as it should. But I think if you're looking at the future, the visits by the service chiefs from both areas, will go a long way. And cooperation in the welfare activities, which is equally, you call it a soft power or you call it a thing, is something which is doable in future. So, and involvement of, okay. So these are, just 2 points and I'll close. We talked about the joint manufacturing, the Make in India, Made in India is an option. And here, opportunities are more when we talk about Israel, India, UAE, US cooperation. We have various such minilateral arrangements which can provide, sort of options. So I think I'm going to stop here, and I do propose 1 or 2 suggestions of, doing the joint papers and symposium between the 2 think tanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And of course, it's important for think tankers to do dialogue. We're very short on time. I'm going to conclude this webinar, which was very rich, comprehensive, and complete. Maybe Ambassador Suri can share with us his concluding thoughts as well.
Thank you very much, Hamza. I just wanted to thank Ambassador Loulichki for his very gracious remarks. He's really spoke like a true friend of India, which we know he is. I wanted to build on a couple of the specific suggestions that he made. One is on triangular cooperation in West Africa and Francophone Africa. And I think that's a great idea. And perhaps we should start as think tanks by identifying just maybe 3 areas and 3 countries where we can move forward. Countries, given the turbulence that we've seen recently in Chad and Mali, in Burkina, in Gabon, and Guinea, I think the geography is shrinking a little bit over the last year or so, but I'm sure there are other possibilities that exist. Now, I would say that one of the areas where we could perhaps look at working together is the work that India has done in building digital public infrastructure. And this is something that we've done very successfully. It's something that we've showcased in G20 and in BRICS. And it's catching the imagination that given where technology is taking us, given where convergences are happening, Do we want to leave everything to half a dozen private big tech companies, or do we see the need for state to create the infrastructure the way that India has done? And perhaps I know that Morocco has been talking to India about this, and perhaps it's something that we can look at third countries as well. The other is the point that Ambassador Loulichki made about the reform of the multilateral system. And again, we thank you for your consistent support for India's what we think is a very legitimate candidature for UN Security Council. I'll make sure that I pass on your kind words to Ambassador Navdeep Suri, who was my boss twice over the years, and I have a huge amount of respect for him and Mrs. Suri. So I'll make sure that when we finish, I'll call him and tell him that an old friend of his was remembering him. But you know, in G20 and in BRICS, we've made reform of at least multilateral financial institutions as a key aspect of our agenda items, because you know it's high time that we started working on reforming institutions, that capital doesn't continue to flow to the north where growth is stagnant and returns are minuscule. It should flow to the south, which is where you're seeing the growth take place, and which is where the returns on the capital will come. So it's a skewed system, which all of us, I think, need to work together to fix. And a point that Dr. Meena made about really building institutions for sustainable debt. I think when we see the level of indebtedness around, and we saw how we had to step in to rescue Sri Lanka last year with almost $4 billion of emergency relief, we see that this is something that is needed. And I am mindful that the buzzer is going away, so I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Suri. Ambassador Loulichki, do you have any remarks as well, or?
No, I just wanted to remind ourselves that in less than a month, the Marrakesh will be in the financial institutions regular meeting. And maybe that will be an opportunity for the Indian to get in touch with the Moroccan delegation and maybe some other African delegation, just to exchange views prior to going into decisions within these two extremely important institutions.
Thank you. And maybe just to conclude, Madam Boucetta, you've spoken in your intervention on the potential synergies in the economic sectors. One that recently has come up is renewable energy. Can you just briefly give us what are the challenges for Morocco? Because you've spoken also about Morocco. How can it attract the Indian investments, but also technological transfer in here? And very briefly, the ways forward on that issue.
Yeah, I know that the time is very short, so maybe what I have to say is just we have two pillars where we can invest together, and there is a very potential. The first one, I think, how we can build a very integrated value chains in different sectors, and energy is one of the most sectors that have a great potential. And I know that India is investing a lot. And Morocco, as a country in the west of Africa, with very big potential in renewable energy, but also in hydrogen, green hydrogen, and in general in clean energy, can be a good partner to serve European markets, but also to address the needs of African countries. The second point, or the second pillar in my point of view, is how can we build a very or shared technological platform, because we know that in this sector, especially in energy, there is a very high level of quick development or technological development that need to address innovation. How can we develop R&D, and how can we have capacity building? So if we can join our efforts to build very competitive, innovative, smart technological platform together, that could be one of the major, how can I say, pillar of collaboration where we can have a win-win situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And of course, just before we conclude, I just want to give to Dr. Singh Roy just maybe 2 minutes for final remarks before we end this webinar.
Well, I think Ambassador Suri, really summed up in a very clear way as to what is doable. So when we are looking at the meaningful economic partnership that can be developed between the two countries, there are certain areas like, traditional medicine, which is a common factor between two countries. Education has been talked about, but I think medical tourism, film and fashion industry, these are some of the areas, in addition to two important areas where we talk about agriculture and the food security and of course the renewable energy. I feel, there is so much to do when we talk about the soft power of both the countries, and there is a huge, sort of craze of going to Morocco and Egypt when it comes to tourism. There's youth which is ready to go on trips, and I think that would set a common goal for both the countries, to utilize the maximum as far as the tourist industry is concerned from India to Egypt and Morocco. And particularly the film industry, the shooting of films is something which really can make a difference in a better interaction between these countries. And fashion industry is again a very big example. And here I'm bringing the textile also as such part of it. So I think these are some of the key areas where we need to look forward. And security and defense, of course, they are considered to be the hard power, but I think there are softer developmental cooperation, particularly I would say in the area of countering extremism, terrorism, is something which will be a right opportunity for all of us to take the relationship forward bilaterally as well as regionally. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for taking time to be in this webinar and for sharing your expert insights. It was a comprehensive and also complete set of debates and also points. And once again, thank you. Thank you for being with us. And also thank you to the Observer Research Foundation and the Policy Center for setting this up. Thank you very much.